Hello boxetters, welcome to another instruction video. This time we have Doctor Strange, just showing the completed model there with the cloak of levitation and the time stone and all the little details, his shoes and his pants and his backside. And he comes on a little stand there as well, which we'll get to in another instruction video. You can download these three pieces, these three sheets that we need for our Doctor Strange paper toy. You can download and print those and then get to this stage where we're cutting. And this first video is the Doctor Strange head, just showing you there the different parts and pieces. We've got his arms and ears on there as well as his head, and you can see it gets a little bit tricky around his beard and around his quiff, the fringe of his hair up there. But if you follow along to this video, everything will make sense. Okay, as always, keep those scissors nice and straight, sort of like right in front of you. And I'm just cutting out around the ear and arm there. I'm going to set that to one side to sort out later. It's always easier to sort of at first cut out the separate parts, and then when you're getting into all those sort of tricky corner places to cut, you've not got that part of the paper is out of the way. It just makes things easier. But we'll still take our time to cut round those corners nice and smoothly. You can see how with my non-cutting hand, that's doing most of the work rather than the hand that I've got the scissors in. That's moving the paper around the scissors. Makes your cuts a lot smoother and a lot easier to manage. Just trim off that end bit there, and then we'll get stuck into getting around the beard and the hair. Now you can probably guess that the what I'm cutting right at the moment, that's going to be the back of the beard, so that's going to fold around the back, and although you probably don't see it that much, it just sort of gives a nice sense of completion to the toy, that it's not just white paper around the back, that he's got a complete goatee. So we'll fold around there, and you can see sort of I'm going to cut round this tab at the bottom that will tuck inside the head to give it a bit more stability. And I'm going to trim all the way off to there, just complete that long cut before I get into just trimming the other side of his beard. Just moving all the little bits of rubbish, all the extra paper that I don't need, off to one side into a bin. And just taking my time, going around those curves, cutting through this. You'll see on each sheet there's a little cut and fold sort of key to follow along the solid. I think they're grey lines for Doctor Strange. The solid grey lines are cut lines, and the dotted lines that you can see on the tabs on the edges there, they're the fold lines. And I'm making a nice long straight cut all the way up there. Again, this is just to sort of like get rid of that extra bit of paper, then it makes cutting those little bits a little bit easier. See how the scissors are nice and, well, yep, nice and straight in front there, and then the paper, I'll move that around the scissors to get those nice curved bits. And the other one there, that's going to be where the side of Stephen Strange's hair matches up with the back. And then that square that I'm starting to cut around now, that's going to be the top of his head. looks a little odd at the moment, but once we've made these last few cuts and started to make some folds, it'll all start to come together. So we've got a cut that goes right the way through the middle there. That's the end. And then we've got a cut out, yep, that little corner bit on that tab. And then this shape in between. Now you might find that it's easier to, like I'm doing here, to make a fold before you make a cut. So yeah, just folding and pinching that together there, then that makes it easier to get in there and cut that shape out. So we can tuck that behind there, or inside his head even. Whoa, we're inside Doctor Strange's head. Inside anybody's head is pretty crazy, but inside Doctor Strange's head, that must be mental. Anyway, carrying on, we're cutting out along his quiff, Stephen's quiff, or Stephen's fringe. And again, that works the same as the his goatee. That part of the hair, you will see that more than you'll see the back of the goatee, and that just makes it a little bit more complete, so that you've not got just a white back to his quiff. And take your time around those tricky bits, and you can just pinch off if it's nearly clipped off. And now we can get on to folding. So I've already made that fold on that side there, and we'll start off, carry on from there, and just bend and fold the paper around those dotted lines. Doesn't need to be a nice sharp fold where you run your fingernail or you run a ruler or scissors over it. You can just, as I'm doing here, sort of line up, bend the paper over, line up that fold, and then just make a little pinch around it. And there's no set sort of there's no set way to fold this up. You can fold whatever part you want first, but I guess, yeah, if you fold along with me, then you won't miss bits. Now that bit there, that back bit, you fold it one way and then fold it back the other, because that's going to slot in to like that. So that goes sort of on the inside of Doctor Strange's head. And then we'll fold and bend round. Again, tuck that out of the way, make it easier for yourself. And fold and a pinch around there on that side. And then we get to his fringe again. And there's a tab that tucks on the inside of his head, so I bend it one way and then bend it back the other way. I'll show you here let's make that middle fold first. See how that folds around and matches up, so you've got a front and then a back, and then that tab tucks in onto the inside of our box head. A few more folds to make. Front to the side of his head there, and then the side to the back of his head, and then just those little tabs as well. Those tabs help to keep the toy stable and keep the head together, and also sort of gets rid of a few gaps to make the toy look a little bit more complete. Okay, just checking all the way around that I've made all the folds that I need to make. It's a lot easier to fold everything before you get into sticking things. But yeah, what I'll have a what's it called? A tape dispenser. Just to help sort of when you're folding and sort of holding things together, having a tape dispenser is a lot better than sort of cutting a whole bunch of bits of tape out and sticking them sort of to the end of the table and then having to peel them off. It's a lot easier just to have that little tape dispenser, and you can pick bits of tape off one-handed and you can make them all sorts of different lengths that you need. We're just putting some tape up around the back of the hair there. And it gets a little bit fiddly and a little bit tricky, but just take your time, line things up, and then stick things down. Okay, and one of the best, or sort of the way that I like to do it, just showing you how I'm lining that up there. Sort of those dotted lines help to keep things lined up. So stick half the tape on one side, and then it gives you time to sort of like line things up. Oh, I've gone off camera a bit. There we go. That's better. And then you bend the other half of the tape round once you've got that everything lined up. Okay, a bit tricky again round where the goatee is. We just need some little bits of tape just to hold his beard together. And we'll put another one around the other side. And then see how that tab is going to tuck inside and the bottom of his neck there. Can line that up. And then, like I was saying just before, you can stick half the tape to one side. I've just sort of like bent it round and I'm holding it with my thumb there. Can't see quite clearly because the tape is transparent, see-through. But there I've stuck it to the back there. Again, we'll line up just a few more bits to stick. We'll line that tab up with the other side. Get a bit of tape, sticking on half. Make sure it's nicely lined up again. Once it is, then we'll bend that bit of tape round and stick it to the other side. Okay, just one last flap to fold in for the back of his head. Start on one side. Line that up. Line up the sort of like the features as well. I guess you can see sort of that side, the edge of his hair. That'll help you to line things up and get things matching. And then you can see sort of like you might think you're finished, but sort of like you squeeze it and you get some gaps. So let's tape up those gaps. There's one at the bottom there, and then one. What are we done? Yeah, there we're done. We're done with his head. So let's set that to one side, and then we'll cut out his arms and his ears. So take your time with these. The ears look like the joint to the top of his knuckles there, but if you follow the cut lines and follow what I'm doing on this video, you'll see that we've got an arm separated from the ear. There's only a few fold lines on the ear, but again, similar to the beard and to his fringe, the ear folds sort of like folds onto itself, so that you've got a front to the ear and a back to the ear as well. And you can see 1, 2, 3 fold lines. Start by folding that middle one there. Just basically folding the ear straight in half, and then you've got a back and a front to the ear. Then you've got a little sort of like tab that we're going to make a hinge with those last 2 fold lines, and that's so that the ear sort of flaps out a little bit, I guess. And you can see it will go on the side, the head there, and that flap helps to stick it to the head and also to make the ear flap out a bit. So the first bit of sticking we'll do is to the edge of the ear there, so it stays together, like so. And then we'll put a little bit of tape on the front of the ear, stick half of it there, and then we'll line it up with his sideburns and that little gap between his hair. See how that flaps around? And now we're going to stick that tab down to his head, that other side, stick that down there, and then we can bend that ear, fold that ear around. And there you go, you've got more Stephen Strange with one ear. Let's go and cut the other one out there before we move on to his onto his arms. Again, with cutting as well, you don't have to do it in this particular order. You could have done his arms and his ears first before his head. That's perfectly fine as well. Stick the arms to one side and just trim off those white bits. Most of sort of cutting these paper toys out is just cutting out the white bits. If you're ever stuck or confused about what you need to cut and you can't quite follow the cut lines, then just cut out all the white bits. Keep a tidy workspace, keep all your rubbish off to one side, and here's how you fold that ear again. Just fold it in half and then fold that little tab around the back of the ear. Give it a good pinch, and then we get a good sort of created a hinge for his ear to flap on. Now you might find that there's maybe a little bit of a few little bits to trim off that don't quite match up. That's all right. Just make a little trim, little cut, and then you can get on with sticking it together. Take round the back into the front. And then half a piece of tape on the front of his ear, and the other half's going to get stuck to his head, like so. And then remember that little bit that you need to stick down the back so it makes his ear nice and stable, like so. And then we can bend that ear around, and then yay, Stephen Strange has 2 ears. And then you can bend and position them wherever you like. Okay, now the arms look identical, and they are for cutting and folding and sticking purposes, but you'll notice when we come to stick them to the body that there is actually a left arm and a right arm. The difference between those two is that the thumbs should always be facing the front, facing out towards you. You'll see when we stick his arms on his body later on. If you're confused by the way that I'm explaining it, confused myself, which is very easy to do. Anyway, continuing on with cutting out Doctor Strange's arms. Just cutting around those tabs there that are going to give our arms a bit of stability. Coming straight off there, keeping a nice tidy crafting space, getting rid of our rubbish. And we've cut the first arm out. Okay, scissors to one side. We'll just make some nice gentle folds. Just bending the paper nice and gently. The paper, I'm not using sort of standard office paper for this. It is a little bit heavier. It's called, I think it's 150 GSM paper. So it's not quite card. It's just sort of like a nicer, thicker paper. Standard office paper is about 80 GSM. Which you can still make these paper toys out of that. Out of 80 GSM paper, you can still print them on that. They'll still cut and fold and stick and stay together. But yeah, 150 GSM just makes it look a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, gives it a nicer sort of finish on the print, and makes your paper toy a little bit sturdier. Okay, we're already sticking his arm together. Again, sort of line things up with the dotted lines and the edges, obviously, but then you can also start to use the design, the sort of like the features of like where the sleeve and the skin meet up. If you try and get those lined up as best that you can, and tuck all those tabs in, and that'll help to keep those tabs sort of help us line things up, get rid of any gaps, and just make the paper toy look more pleasing. On to Doctor Strange's second arm. Just making some nice cuts. Taking our time, keeping the scissors nice and straight. The non-cutting hand is doing most of the work by moving the paper around the scissors. My scissor hand hardly moves, other than to sort of put pressure onto the scissors, try not to make it waggle around with those sharp pointy scissors. Just keep them nice and straight out in front, and also sort of like level to the table, I guess you could say. Just nice and straight out in front. And there we go, nearly finished cutting his second arm out here. I'm getting close to the end of this part of the instructions as well. We've still got instruction videos for his body. You can see at the top there, the edge of his body, and also the stand and the time stone, which we'll again get to in another separate video. Okay, just making those final folds there along the side of his arm. All tabs around the side there. Then there's this one along his knuckles, and then this one in the middle. Now you can fold along the dotted line, or you can sort of like bend it round just to make sure that it's going to match up all the way around there. And you can see that with that shape, once you've made the folds, that shape comes together straight away. It's the same pattern and shape for the feet. So again, really handy to have that tape dispenser so that we can line things up with one hand and then just pick a bit of tape off with your spare hand. Saves a lot of hassle. Okay, the arms all in, fold those knuckle tabs in, tuck those inside, and one last bit of tape. And Stephen Strange now has two arms. You can see there the thumbs are sticking out the front there. You see there, there's the thumbs, the thumbnails, and the little lines for the thumbs. They need to be facing the front, not the back, because look, if they're facing the back, then it looks like he's twisted his arms around. Anyway, have fun. I'll see you on the next video.